Hey gang, it's Ryan from Old School Automotive, and you can see behind me we got a chunk of a body tub from an old school 66 through 77 Bronco. We've sandblasted all the areas that are going to be reused. The floorboards we left alone because we got replacement floorboards we're going to weld in. But we're going to be doing a little bit of body work today, and we'll show you a couple of things here real quick. Okay, right here we've got one of the original rocker panels. And what I want to point out, the reason I'm doing this is you'll notice there's some holes here and some holes here by this dent. This is actually like the old way of doing body repairs, where what they would do is instead of pulling the dent out, I mean, you can see maybe where they pulled it out a little bit here. That's probably what they did, is they drilled a hole and threaded in a bolt and then used a slide hammer to pull this out. But they don't pull it out all the way. They used to just leave the dents in place and drill holes and then just smear on super thick body filler. So there was Bondo that was probably a, half, 3/4 of an inch thick in here. And the holes are so the Bondo will kind of leak through and form a mechanical lock. The problem is that the back side of these rocker panels, if you are off-roading or get into deep water, you're going to get moisture in the back of these, and then that Bondo that's through there is just going to act like a sponge and suck all that moisture in. The Bondo swells, causes rust, falls out, just bad juju. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a little bit of hammer and dolly work on this. If you had an anvil, that'd be great. I don't, so I'm probably going to be using the shop floor here. But we're going to just try to hammer out some of these dents to get this back a little bit closer to the factory contour so that we don't have to put nearly as much Bondo on. It'll just be a skim coat when we're done here. And then once we've done that, we're going to weld these holes shut. Okay, after a little hammer and dolly work, it's not perfect. You can see it's definitely better than it was. Inside view. See the outside, still got a little bit of crease here. We'll work that with hammer and dolly after, a little later on. And this is all popped back in a lot closer to the factory contour. In fact, with it like this right now, we could push it in just a little bit probably and just Bondo and get the contour right. But we'll work the metal to get it as close as possible. So next up, we're going to spray everything with some epoxy primer, which is great for locking out moisture and adhering to bare metal. And in order to do that, we're going to clean these up with some prep salt to remove any oils from like our fingers where we handled them, and just to make sure there's no other contaminants on here. And that's of course after we vacuum out the last of the sandblasting sand that might be left in any little nooks and crannies. So we'll go take care of that right now. Over here we got the body tub. This is the I call it the cowl and passenger area assembly. The front clip has been removed by drilling out the spot welds, and the bed has also been removed by drilling out the spot welds. And this way, when we go to reassemble it, we just line up all the spot welds and we can weld it back together, and it'll maintain the factory alignment. At least that's the plan anyway. But you can see this thing got pretty crusty. There's some holes right through the floorboard there, and even here in the seat platform. There's some pretty good pitting and a little bit of rust through. So this is going to get some patching put in here. We got floorboard sections to replace this. Those are right over there. And those will get welded in properly. And then once we got all that put in, actually before we even weld in the floor pans, we're going to squirt some epoxy primer on this because this is all freshly sandblasted. And if we leave this very long, it's going to flash rust, and we don't want that. So we're just going to hit it with some epoxy primer just to lock it in and keep it from rusting any further. As the name implies, epoxy primer is two parts that have to be mixed together. In this case, we're using Nason Gray primer. It's just a low-cost, general-purpose primer that's good for this application. There's a quart of primer and a quart of activator. You mix them together at a 1-to-1 ratio. This is going to give us about a half gallon of sprayable material, which should be plenty to cover this section of the body tub, the rocker panels, and the taillight panels. Anytime you're spraying paint, you're going to want to make sure you wear a decent quality respirator. You can see here my helper Gus is actually wearing a military surplus gas mask, but just standing clear of the spray area for a spectator is usually plenty. But if you're the one spraying, you're going to be right in that cloud of sprayed paint, and your lungs are important, and you only got one set, so protect them. Wear a respirator. Besides that, this stuff can make you really dizzy, and you could, pass out, fall down, hurt yourself. Also, make sure to mask off anything that you don't want getting overspray on it. Move cars far out of the way, and not a bad idea to lay down a tarp or at least wet the surface you're going to be working on so your floor doesn't get wrecked. Okay, so we got our Bronco panels epoxy primed. That should seal out any oxygen, preventing the metal from rusting. And we got the tub inside already. All epoxy primed. The parts that didn't get primed, of course, are going to get cut out because we got replacement floorboards they're going to weld in. But this should hold it until we are able to start our body assembly. Okay, gang. Next up, we're going to be taking some spot welds out of the old floor pan so we can replace them. And to do that, you really ought to get a dedicated spot weld cutter. This one is by Blair, part number 13224. I'll have a link in my description. But what these are, it's just a 3/8 diameter multi-cutter, double-sided hardened steel cutter that is just right for cutting out these spot welds. You can use a drill bit, but you end up blowing holes through both panels, which you don't want. This you can cut out just around the spot weld on the top panel, leaving the bottom panel intact, so you'll have a nice solid surface to weld to. This one, you can see as you use them, they're pretty brittle, so if they catch or the thing jumps, it tends to break teeth off. So you're definitely going to want to have some replacement cutter heads, which I'll have a link to these in the description as well. But basically, it's threaded so that as the cutter is cutting, it self-tightens. So you're just going to need a good set of pliers, and you can twist that off. Sometimes you need to get the pliers on there or give it really good kind of a thump to break that loose if you've been using it lately. But anyway, you just unscrew the old one, take a fresh one, twist it on just like that. That's all there is to it. It self-tightens, so you don't have to worry about getting it, you don't have to go all He-Man on the thing. Just snug it up, and once it's snug, there you go. It'll tighten itself for all the rest of what you're going to need. But to make it work, it's got a spring-loaded piece in the middle. Let me get something hard to push against here. You can see it's got this little spring-loaded part. So you just kind of, you'll use a center punch the center of your spot weld, and then this little point, this spring-loaded point, will center the cutter, and you just drill the spot welds out just like that. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, here we're going to demo removing one of our spot welds. So first, we got a spot weld that's centered up in the sheet metal right around here. So we just use our automatic center punch and put this in the center of the spot weld. And we just push down until we get a nice little divot right in the center of the spot weld. So next up, we got some Cuddy's stick lubricant. This helps the cutter stay sharp. Basically, it's just kind of like a waxy type stuff. Cutting lubricant. I'm just gonna dunk my cutting tip in here and get a little bit of that lubricant on there. A dab will do you. It doesn't take a whole lot, but it's not a bad idea to reapply every spot weld you cut out. Next, you're gonna make sure your drill is set to the low speed setting, because this cutter, you want to be cutting slow and not like burning this thing like crazy. You'll overheat it, you'll wreck the temper, you'll end up busting teeth off, it'll cost you a bunch of money in replacement cutter heads. So you want to run this slow. The package recommends about 500 RPM, and just take your time. So now we're going to use our spring-loaded little centering pin, put it in the center of the divot that we made with our center punch, then we're just going to start cutting the spot weld. You want to make sure your drill and cutter head is perpendicular to the spot weld, and if the sheet metal is old, it's not perfect, you might end up having to angle this a little bit so you're getting even cutting all the way around, because if you're cutting one side, it's going to tend to jump and you'll break teeth off. So let's go ahead and we're just going to start the cutting process, and we're just using light pressure, just getting the feel for where the cutter head likes to be. And that's all we're doing, is just applying light pressure till we get to that top level of sheet metal. So I'm kind of pressing down on this drill about like a firm handshake. Maybe just a little bit more, maybe like I'm holding up a brick or something, but definitely no more pressure than a cinder block would apply. And I'm trying to keep this thing as vertical as possible because as I get slightly off angle, I can feel this thing wants to walk and jump. And that's how teeth get broken. Okay, now we're going to stop, check our progress. We're a little more than halfway through. And then we center our spring-loaded centering tip again and resume cutting. I'm going to add a little more pressure just to get the cutting going. And what I'm looking for is you'll either see a distinct line around the edge of the cut where the sheet metal is starting to pull apart, or sometimes you'll see the rust from in between the two layers of sheet metal to indicate you've gotten all the way through. There. So that's the basic premise right there. And then once we've got the majority of all you see the little spot welds all the way along here, all these little discolored spots are where there's spot welds. The ones that kind of fall, like these ones over here, kind of fall on the edge of a panel. Those are a little more difficult because it's going to be cutting through and then going out and not cutting, and then cutting through and going out and not cutting. So you got to be really careful. Do those last because that's where you're most likely to break teeth off your cutter head. So I'm going to go ahead. At this point, we're going to jump into our time lapse, and I'm going to drill out all the rest of these spot welds in preparation for getting this floorboard out of here. And the cut ease pictured here, link in description, is originally designed for cutting aluminum. It helps keep saw blades from clogging up with aluminum when you're cutting aluminum, but it works really good for this application as well. Also, you'll notice here that I remembered my automatic center punch is getting a little tired, so I got out the manual center punch in order to make the divots a little deeper to keep the automatic pilot from walking too far. Okay, now there are some places like right here and right here, you can see there's a couple of spot welds that are right close to this vertical piece, and because it's so close, you can't get the drill square onto it. Like if I was gonna have this drill square, it would be way out here. So I can only get an angle cut on that. So places like that, our best bet is to use a die grinder with one of these carbide burrs. This is the same kind like you would use for porting cylinder heads. Or if you don't have an air compressor and an air die grinder, you can use a Dremel tool with a grinding stone to get those out of there. But these carbide burrs produce some nasty little slivers, and you definitely want to make sure that you're wearing gloves and eye protection. This is like, I mean, I'm really lax about eye pro and ear pro, but this is one of those places where I definitely use it. If you have a shop vac, it helps to suck up these as you're cutting it too. But I'll just grind out these two right now and show you real quick. Okay, now once we got a little bit of the cut made, we're just using our chisel just like the way we have been to kind of separate the two pieces of sheet metal. And by watching how the sheet metal reacts, we can kind of see where else we need to cut. So it's pulling up here, but it's still held down here, so I'm going to grind a little bit more of these. And on this one right here in the back, you probably can't see it on camera, but I'm seeing just a little bit of a part line start to develop right there. So I know that I'm getting through that top layer of sheet metal. There we go. See, it's starting to separate here. There see right there, we got the sheet metals parting ways, and you can see the part line is highlighted by the surface rust in between the two panels. So yeah, we're just going to keep hunting along here, trying to find if there's any more spot welds. Using our hammer and chisel. If we come up on any more, we're going to use that die grinder to get them out. Yeah, it looks like we've got another one going right here. So we'll go ahead and grind that out off camera. We'll follow up in just a bit here. Okay, now here along this is where there's a row of spot welds, because there's a reinforcement rib right underneath the body right here. And you can see these spot welds are pretty rusty through. In fact, that's usually a good way to spot where the spot welds are, is just all these rusty spots. But here, it's kind of just ridiculous to be drilling all these little spot welds when this is just a throwaway, rotted out piece of metal that we're not going to save. That's where the old air hammer, often called a muffler gun, comes in. We're using the chisel with the little kind of cutter in the middle, so it can ride around the edge of these spot welds and cut them out. And basically, we're just going to carefully use the muffler gun to try to get these pieces of sheet metal apart. So we're just using careful pressure on our air. Making sure that the chisel goes between the pieces of metal. We can just buzz it apart this way and save a lot of time. Zip it apart all the way across. Yeah. That's come loose now. Now it's just a question of getting in on the other side. Maybe we can even get in here on one of these rusty spots and kind of go down this way. I'm just going to use this and actually cut the sheet metal just so I can get in here at a better angle. Whoops. Cool. Well, we're going to take a zip cut. We're going to trim across right here because this floorboard is out. We might even just trim across down here like this, and then we can just peel this center section out and just get it out little bits at a time. Let's go to time lapse for that.
Now, when you're removing nasty old rusted floorboards like this, you got to keep in mind this is trashed, ruined sheet metal that you're not going to be probably reusing for anything else. And I'm guilty of this myself. I try to do a super good job removing the parts as if it were going to be reused. I don't know why I do it. Maybe it's just some OCD or something. But don't get wrapped around the axle trying to save this rusty sheet metal. As long as you're not damaging the parts you're going to be reusing, it's okay to use cutters and air hammers and stuff like that in order to get this sheet metal out quickly. The idea is to get this job done and over with so you can move on to the next step and get the repairs underway, because what's the point in trying to save rusty old sheet metal? Now that said, you got to be careful where you are applying that cutting wheel. Always make sure to duck underneath, as you can see me doing here, to check what's on the other side of that sheet metal you're about to cut out, because you're going to feel awful if you go to cut out rusty sheet metal and you accidentally hack something important in half, chop through a fuel line, God forbid, or a brake line, or just sawing accidentally through one of those reinforcement ribs that you have to save. That's the kind of thing that's going to add huge expense and massive difficulty to a project like this that's already tough enough. So just look twice before you cut, measure twice, cut once.
Okay, we got the floorboard all cut out. Up to the toe board, of course, we're going to clean the toe board up, cutting out more of that, because there's some pretty good rot going along from the edge of the toe board to the tunnel cover. But I wanted to show you guys right here, these are the reinforcement ribs that run onto the body. These, give the sheet metal some stiffness, some structure. It's really the structure of the Bronco, the bones of it. This one right here is where the forward body mount goes, and every single Bronco I've ever worked on has had a similar problem. And you can see right at that body mount, this cross member is kind of got it's sagging around the body mount, and you can see here, look, there's all kinds of stress cracks. These are fatigue cracks, and I don't know what it is, but my suspicion is that these forward body mounts right by the doorposts here carry a disproportionate amount of weight from the Bronco, and they simply all fatigue and rust. These cross members can fill up with mud and water, and a lot of times they rust from the inside out. This one's a little bit rusty, but these are actually not bad because this was an Arizona truck. This vehicle rotted from the inside out. It had a carpet, and it leaked around the carpet. The carpet got wet, rotted the floorboards from the inside out. The underside looks really good, but northern and midwestern trucks, or trucks that are used for mudding a lot, they're going to have a lot of rot on the inside of these cross members, and what the net result is, the body starts sagging. And as you can see, that body mount is right there. As the body sags, this doorpost is going to start to drop down, and that leads to a lot of these door alignment issues you'll get in the Bronco. So you'll end up looking at some Bronco from the side, and you'll notice that the front fender kind of slopes downward to this point, and then the door kind of slopes upward to that point, and then the bedside will be straight. It's, also will result in the door sagging down and not wanting to line up, or you have to lift the door to shut it because those doorposts, either the doorposts are rotted. In this case, this is a nice solid doorpost. Again, nice Arizona truck, but it's fatigued around that body mount, and so it's sagged. So if we didn't address this truck is never gonna, have its doors line up properly. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna have to jack this up a little bit off of the body cart here and do a little hammer and dolly work and get this thing laser straight. And then I'm probably gonna lay a whole bunch of steel in here to help reinforce this body mount area and help export that weight of the Bronco from this center point out to the edges. We might even run, you know what, I actually just had a good idea right now. In the back, the factory put these triangular braces. I think that's what I'd like to do with this, is we're gonna lay a couple of triangular braces in here from the inner rocker. I'm gonna duplicate this factory one here, but maybe make it a little bit longer, and perhaps even do a little bit of like a reinforcement, like an I-beam style reinforcement or C-channel or something like that on the inside to help export this stress that's causing this body mount to sag and fatigue. But anyway, that's it for how we remove the floor panels. As you can see, even using the air hammer, we haven't bent up these cross members at all. And even the sheet metal that's rotted and is going to get replaced, we're probably going to zip this out and add a nice new little 90-degree bend here, so we got a nice solid piece of metal to weld our new floorboard to. But even using the air hammer, we didn't mess up these cross members because we were careful in how we aimed it, and we used a nice sharp chisel bit. So now what we need to do is all these little places where there's spot welds, well, not this because we're going to cut it out, but like on here, we're going to use a flap wheel, and we're going to remove any remaining bits of the spot weld centers. We're going to clean up the metal and wire wheel it really good, and we're going to get ready to weld some fresh sheet metal in, and we'll catch that in the next video. Okay, gang, well, that's how you do it right there. Drill out the spot welds on any sheet metal you need saved, like here on the outer rocker panel. We need to save that sheet metal and reuse it, so we're using the spot weld cutter to cut out those spot welds properly. Any place the sheet metal is not going to get reused, like where that rusty floorboard was attached to the cross members, just hit the old muffler gun, get that sucker out of there, use the zip disc, cut it out. And also, let me just switch this camera quick here. You can see that when I use the zip disc, I left a little bit of an edge along here, so I know exactly where this bend in the floorboard needs to go. That way, I've got a reference point for when I put in the new floorboard. But basically, that's it. Next video, we're gonna work on getting the new floorboard fitted and welded in. But in the meantime, keep on wrenching. Like and subscribe. It really helps me out here big time. And I'm gonna have links down below in the comment section for the tools that I'm using. And again, it helps me. They're affiliate links with Amazon. Helps me bring you more content. So if you're going to order tools anyway, might as well help a brother out. All right, thanks guys. We'll catch you next time.